So I'm here with Sam Sheen. Hi, Sam.
Hey there, how are you doing?
Good, good. So you've helped us recently put a paper together, a report, and spoken to loads of people as we've gone through this about the RegTech and the adoption of RegTech within financial services. So we just wanted to have a quick chat today about some of your thoughts as you've and findings as we've gone through that. Um, so maybe just to start us off, can you give us a quick overview of the report and why you felt it was an important topic to cover at the moment?
Sure. So the report itself covers from a very practical perspective the actual selection, integration, and relationship with a RegTech and a RegTech solution provider. And the reason why it seemed important is since 2016, 17, when this all seemed like a magical concept and people were wading into the idea of using tech, we're now much further down the road, and we're sort of at a stage now where people are much more mature in their choice of technology and what they expect out of these relationships. So I sort of felt it was a really good idea to actually check in and find out, when do those relationships work, and when do they not, and can you do anything to make them better?
Absolutely, and interestingly, we use the sort of relationship analogy in the report, and that was a great idea. Why do you think it was a sort of such a relevant analogy to use?
Well, because I think when you decide to use some form of technology, it's a long-term relationship. So just like normal people in a personal relationship, you want to invest the time to get to know each other. Do you like similar things? Could you get along with each other if, say, you were locked in together for 2 years during a pandemic? And how would you resolve problems and challenges? Do you fight well together? Do you disagree? What's your form of communication? And also there are times when, just quite frankly, it just doesn't work out. So how do you go about making that decision that despite all the pain and aggro, it's actually worth walking away from using a solution provider, both providers, and not only both providers, from both people, not just the financial institution, but sometimes even for the RegTech provider.
And we in the report we talk about all the kinds of stages from the start, as the start of that process all the way through sort of that relationship. But maybe what were some of the sort of surprises from some of the interviews that you did with some of the industry experts?
Wow, a lot of things were surprising. First, in terms of the similarities of challenges they experienced, but also the consensus they had about things which were really good and things which were deal breakers. So really good things they all agreed with was candor, was actually having a solution provider who was prepared to tell them what they can't deliver for them. And they were more inclined to trust and pursue that relationship possibility far more than someone who promised to do everything, as one expert said, like wash the dishes and vacuum their house. And similarly, lacking consistency of support post-integration was really considered a turnoff and a deal breaker. In other words, starting to think about looking for a new place to live. Really surprised by the number of people who said, if promise support doesn't crystallize when we need it, once we've started to use a tool to make sure we're using it the best way possible,
Yeah.
we'd be prepared to look for somebody else.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really valid point. I mean, one of the things that we find as well is we get asked all the time, which products or vendors are good in the market, and it's that peer recommendation seems to be absolutely critical for people identifying providers who they might want to work with. Do you think that's kind of become more important recently? Is this the way that it's always happened?
Yeah, I'm not sure who's out there amongst the lovely people who design websites and give people advice on how to set them up, but pretty much the consistent message from our financial institution experts was, we can't understand what solution providers are delivering on their websites. We're going to them, we're reading them, we don't understand what their solutions do. It doesn't have the real stuff we need. So it's better for me to go to a peer and say, how did you integrate it? Were there extra bells and whistles? Was it easy to customize? Did you have any challenges with the integration? How do you find them as a cultural fit with you? Were
Yeah.
they prepared to go the long yards? Anything post-integration where you needed new requirements? How long does it take them to do updates? Are we talking you get a notice within a couple of days, or is it every 12 to 18 months? Really found that missing bit of information that can't get on websites was far more reliable if they went to another peer. So referrals are a really big driving factor.
We've actually seen an example of that where we help people connect people who work with the provider, people who are looking at the provider, and the feedback that that person can give about the provider is just invaluable, and it probably save them a whole bunch of a lot of time and potentially money, and help them with their decision making process hugely.
For sure, right? And you do it in a personal relationship. You'd much rather have somebody introduce you than go in cold having no idea what you're expecting.
Yeah, 100%. And so in terms of the financial, if you're sat in the financial service, the professionals who work in these financial institutions, what do you think from the report and the research that we did, what would be one of the biggest takeaways for them?
Do your homework and be really honest about where you are at the moment. One of our experts really put it very plainly. If you've got bad procedures and bad processes, you're simply going to digitize bad procedures and bad processes.
Yeah.
Really requires you take a hard look at exactly where you are in your compliance evolution. Are you in the middle of making changes? Have you not got everything written down? Do you know it doesn't work the way you intended it to? Do you have people issues? Technology will not solve all of those things. And really, you need to have a hard look of, are you ready to go before you start going out there and seeing what's possible? And the reason for that is then you can fully optimize using a solution. The feedback was a lot of people get really excited. They jump into the middle. They think their problem is in one place, but in actual fact realize when they start doing the integration, there's a whole lot of kind of procedural updating that needs to happen, and it makes the project fall behind.
Yeah, I mean, we speak to clients all the time, and some want to dive straight into vendor selection and everything else, and you go, okay, well, do you understand your requirements? Do you understand what you need? And have you really evaluated, where you are as a business? And it's really refreshing on the other side when you get a client who says, no, we absolutely know that technology needs to come later. We need to sort this stuff out first. And you go, yes, absolutely. So that's always, refreshing.
For sure.
Obviously, that's the sort of financial services perspective. In terms of the guide itself, do you think it can also help some of the RegTech providers?
I think so. I think there's a couple of things to learn from this since the market has started maturing. And that's in terms of those initial discussions. The feedback from experts was they do not want to be killed with a PowerPoint presentation that is longer than 10 slides, right? Lots of people like to drive the message home with their full suite and pack. That's not helpful because really financial institutions will probably have with them someone from IT, other major stakeholders around their ops activities. And so they're expecting with those discussions with the RegTech that the person who is there can speak to that level. So in other words, if they say, this is a really interesting tool, can it work for a payment business? That there is somebody there who has some familiarity with what those needs are and what kind of technology differences there might be there. Or they have somebody on hand who can talk about integration support, even language support, for example, where you might have outsourced team in a different jurisdiction. So I think in some ways this report's helpful for RegTechs to just do a sense evaluation of the way that they're approaching those discussions, understanding that they're not going to capture their soulmate on the first date, that it does take an investment of time. But I think the jewel that we were given by one of our experts was find a way to do research about the financial institution in advance. If you show up with a very clear idea of where they're at regulatorily, some of the big stuff they've done recently that might be affecting their operations, that shows them you are really interested in their business, not just to sell them something, but you want to be a partner. And apparently that will keep you beyond just the entry door and really get you in to sit at the table.
Yeah, it's really good piece of advice. Challenging, but good piece of advice. So, I mean, you talked previously about, do your homework is one of the key things. And also we talked about the peer referrals. What would, in terms of where financial institutions, where should they start in this process if they are starting to look for a new RegTech vendor? What would be your sort of key takeaways from that side?
I would say you have to balance it between referrals and doing your research. There is some great online research, don't get me wrong. There's also your fabulous network on LinkedIn and other fellow professionals. I just did it recently for a particular fraud tool and reached out to someone I knew who was worth their weight in gold in terms of telling me solutions they think really work versus those that are limited. And that was even beyond their own tool that they were selling. They were really honest about it. So I think you need to have that combination of talk to your immediate peers, but go further afield as well. And don't be tempted just because somebody offers you a free baseball cap or a very nice notebook, that's the be all and end all. Make sure when you're exploring that they've got a good reputation for support, which means good training, that they know how to train you not only on the change management side of things, how this is going to work, but also how to use their tool fully. Because there's no point in you buying like a really beautiful, expensive Tesla, and you end up burning out the engine because you don't know how to recharge it every night, right? So really that combination, talk to your peers, make sure you do further field research, and really make sure that that's going to be the sort of relationship based on the feedback you get, that they will support you so you can fully use that tool.
Yeah, absolutely, and so some great tips there, and I think even more great details in the report. So look, Sam, thank you for joining me today for this short chat through, and yeah, great advice there.
Thanks so much, and really looking forward to getting some feedback from other people who read the report as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.